Welcome into episode 10 of the Educational Duct Tape Podcast, where I'll be joined by the one and only Matt Miller, and we'll discuss digital representations of hands-on experiments, sticky learning, gallery walks, infographics, lots of googly stuff, and a whole lot more, plus a soapbox segment about the adjacent possible theory. Let's get to it.
Hi, this is Kim Polishuk
and Jen Giffen, hosts of Shooks and Giff, the podcast,
a proud member of the Education Podcast Network,
just like the show you're listening to right now.
The opinions expressed are those of each individual host.
Be sure to check out all of our other great podcasts by visiting edupodcastnetwork.com.
And get ready, because the learning begins in
3, 2, 1.
Welcome to the Educational Duct Tape Podcast with Jake Miller.
Greetings, welcome in duct tapers, and welcome to all the newbies that are joining us today. I'm sure we've got at least a few new friends hopping in to hear Matt Miller today, and I am so excited to have Matt Miller on the podcast, and I'm so excited for you guys to hear what he has to say. I do have my fingers and toes crossed that will convince you that you want to become a permanent duct taper yourself and come along on this weekly ride with me and my friends. I promise that if nothing else, we always do have fun. First off, in recent weeks, I discussed my new GIF a Day project, and the response to that has been flattering, to say the least. People seem to be super excited to get a daily dose of bite-sized learning that can help them progressively level up in a specific skill. If that sounds good to you, you can sign up for more information at JakeMiller.net/GIFAday, GIFADAY. That link will be in the show notes for those of you who are currently walking your dog or cleaning your bathroom or whatever you might be doing while you're listening. Anyhow, what is GIF a Day? Well, over the last few years, I've created and shared about 165 GIFs on Twitter at JakeMillerTech and on my website, JakeMiller.net. And the response to them is always positive. So I'm going to try my hand at making a deep dive into one technology tool across a few dozen GIFs. They'll be packaged into a modern-day correspondence course for people willing to pay a small amount in order to learn a large amount. Instead of the snail mail that people used to receive from correspondence course instructors, GIF a Day participants will receive daily emails from yours truly. For example, subscribers will get an email on Monday of the first week of the course. It'll have a GIF in it that teaches them the first skill relating to that topic. They'll watch it, practice it if they choose, and then carry on with their day. On Tuesday, the next GIF comes, leveling them up one more notch on that same tool. Then on Wednesday, another level, and on Thursday, another, until GIF by GIF, email by email, they become fully competent and skilled in that tool. And all that they used was 3 or 4 minutes each day. And at the end, they'll walk away with those skills along with an ebook of all of the GIFs and a certificate of completion. Now, these are GIFs that I won't be sharing on Twitter or on my website. I'm still going to keep doing other GIFs on Twitter and on my website, but these ones that are part of GIF a Day are just for GIF a Day. So the only way to see them is to be part of the GIF a Day courses. The first iteration, which will happen this spring, will focus on Google Sheets. So I don't know the plan just yet of what GIF is what day, but day 1 might teach you how to, say, find the average of a set of numbers. Then day 2 might teach you how to filter a set of data, and so on until a few weeks later, you're a Google Sheets ninja. If that goes well, there will be more learning opportunities after that. Interested? Sign up at JakeMiller.net/GIFAday, GIFADAY, so that you're among the first to know when the first iteration launches. Another little note that I want to throw in here, I'm sticking a link into the show notes for you to sign up for my newsletter as well. This newsletter packages together reminders about new podcast episodes, any new edu-GIFs in case you've missed them, and news about my ventures like GIF a Day and the EDU GIF Academy. I try to send out a newsletter every 2 weeks or so, and you got to sign up to get them, and that link will be in the show notes. Moving on, as always, at the end of the show, I'll be sharing some of my favorite #EDU duct tape tweets, the new tweeters for this week, some listener content from the Educational Duct Tape Flipgrid community, and an Apple Podcast review. I do want to remind you how to get to that Educational Duct Tape Flipgrid community. It is at eduducttape.com, and then click on the Flipgrid community link, or go directly to flipgrid.com/edu duct tape. That's the perfect place to ask questions that might be used on the show in the future, to give feedback on the show, to get some information on some tech tools that you're puzzled about, maybe to even suggest some of the goofy game questions that I ask with the guests. But most importantly, it's your chance to become a true duct taper and participate in the community that's growing around this show, which is so fun for me to see that happen. This stuff, the reviews, the Flipgrid community, the tweets, that is my favorite part of doing the show. Even more favorite than getting to interview an absolute rock star like Matt Miller. My favorite parts are the connections from listeners and hearing the things that they're doing in their classrooms. It's just so cool. The duct tapers have been so kind to me. They really are the driving force that keeps me cranking out these shows. So it's fun for me to show some love and give them shout outs on the show. So that'll come up after the interview. Oh, sorry. Hold on. Let me just grab my soapbox from over here. Yeah. There we go. That's perfect. Climb up on there. You know, I never checked the weight limit for this soapbox. I hope that it's okay that I'm standing up here. Whatever. Today, I'd like to talk about the adjacent possible theory. I first heard of this theory in George Couros' book, The Innovator's Mindset. He got it from Stephen Johnson, who wrote the book Where Good Ideas Come From, The Natural History of Innovation. I haven't read that book yet, but you can guess it's on my Goodreads list of books to read. Anyhow, on the adjacent possible concept, Johnson says the strange and beautiful truth about the adjacent possible is that its boundaries grow as you explore them. Each new combination opens up the possibility of other new combinations. So in other words, what Johnson is saying is that the adjacent possible is this notion that a new set of possibilities is enabled by taking one step beyond the current state of things. Now, Johnson got this idea from evolutionary biologist Stuart Kauffman. You can tell I researched this, huh? Kauffman's work deals with evolutionary biology. The evolution of the idea from Kauffman to Johnson to Couros and now to me really is an example of adjacent possible itself. Before we get into the implications that I see in education, let's break down that evolution of ideas. Kauffman's work on biology and evolution helped him come up with this theory that each evolutionary step had to be a pivot from what already existed, not a giant biological leap. Essentially, biology didn't jump straight from an amoeba to the well-oiled athletic machine of someone like LeBron James. Essentially, Kauffman's idea explains part of evolutionary theory. Single-celled organisms had to come before bacteria, which had to come before jellyfish, which had to come before insects, which had to come before the earliest mammals, all of the way up the evolutionary chain to another physical wonder like Beyonce. Beyonce. Biology couldn't skip steps here. It could only move to the things that were one step away from what already existed. That's the adjacent possible. Aside from just being beautiful, Beyonce brings up an interesting point here. Her music wouldn't be possible if not for the music that came before her. This is where Stephen Johnson comes in and takes Stuart Kauffman's idea. He read about Kauffman's idea and applied it to his perspectives on ideas and innovation. He realized that any idea or innovation is dependent on the ones that came before it. It's often described as ideas that are just around the corner. People often use metaphors of rooms in a giant house. Think you are currently in one room and your adjacent possible is the rooms that are directly connected. Other rooms branch off of those, but accessing them is not possible until you move one room closer. Johnson theorized that ideas and innovation work the same. Facebook was only possible after MySpace happened, which was only possible after AOL happened, and so on. And now, before this soapbox I'm standing on breaks, I should get around to my point. Any educator's classroom innovations are dependent on the ones before it. You have to move one step forward before accessing a new set of possibilities, the adjacent possible. Oftentimes, an educator isn't even aware of those innovations until they step into a new space, thus opening up that adjacent possible. So, in my stories from recent episodes about my student-paced STEM course, I couldn't have created that whole class prior to using Google Sites, which I couldn't have done without exposure first to something like Google Docs. I likely couldn't have used Google Forms to track my students' progress if I hadn't first used it to perform basic surveys or to collect basic data. And I couldn't have added a Google Calendar for students to manage their pace had I not been previously exposed to Google Calendar. Let's think back to some of our educational duct tape guests. My first guest, back in episode 2, was Ann Radefeld. Years ago, Ann and I coordinated a class from my school and a class from her school, collaborating on ebooks and Google Slides and communicating via Google Hangouts. This would never have entered her mind had she not had that first Google Hangout with her friend's class in England years before. And it could not have entered my mind had I not been exposed to Hangouts in a presentation from Anne herself. So it became the adjacent possible for the two of us. Sarah Rivera in episode 3 talked about her students using PeerGrade to offer peer feedback. She could not have fathomed this possibility prior to using something like Google Docs just for collaboration. Andy Wheelock in episode 4 could not have created a virtual environment about the Diary of Anne Frank had he not been exposed to other virtual environments before that. Alex Orris from episode 5 was at some point exposed to the SAMR model, which opened up the adjacent possible of a menu of ed tech tools aligned to the SAMR model itself. Prior to being exposed to Flipgrid as a basic discussion tool, Sean Fahey could never have been part of a movement like GridPals and connecting with content area experts with guest mode. As a matter of fact, he could never have connected with Carly Mora, episode 7 guest, and created an ebook on Flipgrid without first accessing Twitter to connect with her. Talk about a catalyst of the adjacent possible. Twitter, it's huge. And one of my favorite Twitter follows is Carly. She credits a lot of what she uses in class to what she's learned from the CS and SF team. And had she not first been exposed to that, none of those other things could have happened in her classes. Could Angela Wotecki have helped students create ebooks, or Craig Shield have implemented Google Jamboard prior to helping students collaborate in Google Docs? Doubtful. Today's guest, Matt Miller, is a perfect case study of this. His awesome book, Ditch That Textbook, details his EdTech evolution from the day he realized his students deserved better than going page by page through his textbook. So each of those steps he took was moving into the adjacent possible. So what are the practical implications for you? Well, I'm willing to bet that most of you are not the average run-of-the-mill educators. To varying degrees, you're all thought leaders and catalysts of innovation within your schools. Otherwise, you wouldn't be listening to this podcast right now. So the best thing that you can do is to keep exposing your colleagues to your practices. Share, invite them in to observe, lead professional developments, present at conferences. And what about those other teachers still swimming in the shallow end of the pool wearing their floaties? Just keep moving forward. Each step forward opens up new possibilities. By using, let's say, Screencastify to record a flip lesson today, they may see the possibility of having their students use it tomorrow. And that may lead to them having their students post their videos on Flipgrid the next day. And maybe then share them with GridPals on the next day. And you know what? That begins to open up new adjacent possibilities for their students too. Look at that ripple. Keep moving forward from wherever you are and watch the adjacent possibilities of learning spread. Speaking of adjacent possibilities, 2 years ago, I never could have imagined myself sitting down for a conversation with the Matt Miller. But now, because I've kept moving forward, not only did I get to do it, but now I get to share it with you.
Today's guest.
All right, today our guest is Matt Miller. Matt is an educator, blogger, and presenter from West Central Indiana. He has infused technology and innovative teaching methods in his classes for more than 10 years. He is the author of 2 books, Ditch That Textbook and Ditch That Homework. He writes at the Ditch That Textbook blog about using technology and creative ideas in teaching. He is a must-follow on Twitter at JMattMiller, and his work at ditchthattextbook.com should be required reading for teachers. You can also find him on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook with the handle Ditch That Textbook, or reach out to him at matt@ditchthattextbook.com. And I'm going to stick all of those in the show notes so you can track Matt down and follow all his great content. Thanks for being here this morning, Matt. How you doing?
Hey, it is my pleasure. I am doing great, and I love this show and the format and all of that. And so just super excited to be a part of it on an episode.
Nice. Thanks. I like the super excited in there too.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I'm not even thinking about it. It just comes out, you know?
It comes out to me too. And it sometimes feels like an homage back to the Google Teacher Tribe podcast. For those of you out there that don't listen, Matt, one thing we didn't mention in Matt's innumerable things in that intro there is his podcast, Google Teacher Tribe, along with Casey Bell, where they tend to say they're super excited about things.
Yeah, that's right. We listened to the very, very first episode that we did, and we said it like 20 times, and we're going, oh my goodness, I can't believe we did that. But now it's kind of become a thing. So.
Well, then after I did the first episode of this show, somebody said, I think it was Les, I know you know Les on Twitter, Les is a good guy, reached out to me and said, Jake, I think you found your super excited. And I don't remember what it was. It was like, how cool or super cool. It was super cool.
Super cool. We're super excited. You're super cool.
Right. I must have said super cool a whole lot of times. So now when I say super cool, I'm like, oh, shout out to Les right there.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. Now you can't quit thinking about it.
Right. I'm always either super excited or super cool.
Yeah. It's a good way to roll.
Yeah, that's a good way to roll. That's a good look at life. That's my MO. I'm either super excited or I'm super cool. So along with all the stuff at Ditch That Textbook and the Google Teacher Tribe and those wonderful books, I know you've also got an awesome free resource out there, Matt. You want to tell everybody about that?
Yeah, I do. So this is something I wanted to give away to all of the listeners of the Educational Duct Tape podcast, because we do know that a teacher's favorite price, of course, is free. So I have this free ebook that's available on my website. It's called 101 Practical Ways to Ditch That Textbook, because I'm always looking for ways to bring technology, creativity, innovation into the classroom, practical ways that you can use in class tomorrow. And so this has 101 ideas that you can use. It's got links to articles that explain what to do. It's got screenshots that show you how it's supposed to look. And so if you want to get that, there's actually a couple of other freebies that go with it too, but that's kind of the big one. So if you want to get 101 practical ways to ditch that textbook, you can go to ditchthattextbook.com/101, and that will get that delivered directly to your inbox.
Nice. And I've looked through it. There are a lot of amazing ideas. As you go through it, it feels like it's more than 101. It feels like 201 as you're going through it. And literally everyone I looked at was like, wow, that's a great idea. Sometimes it's seeing those tools that, you already know and love and know how to use, and then seeing them from somebody else's perspective of how it could be used in the classroom. Somebody's don't even realize it.
Right, exactly. Which is kind of the way that I feel about this show too, is like, we've got all of these tools that are disposable. How are we going to use them? And I feel like that's what you get out of this too. So it seems like a good fit anyway.
Oh, yeah, sure. I'm sure anybody that's an educational duct tape listener or a Ditch That Textbooker is going to enjoy those 101 ideas. And even those people who feel like they're, ed tech experts, like there are ideas in there where you're thinking about a tool in a different way from the way they might be. And then it's so shareable. It's just such good shareable content to share it with the teachers you work with.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so let's start off with a little bit of fun, and we're going to play a game of two truths and a lie. And I have to admit here, Matt, I think I've gotten it right like one time so far in the show. So all 26 listeners that we have today, we went up a few. We were normally, last week we were at 21. Today we're at 26 because you're on the show. But they all are fully aware the how horrible I am at two truths and one lie. So we'll see how I do here.
Two truths and one lie.
This will be the one that you get right. You'll be like this. Yeah. I'm horrible at these games. So we'll see how it goes.
Okay. So whenever you're ready, you're gonna give me three statements, and I'm gonna try to guess which one is the lie.
Okay. All right. So here we go. First one. I live on 25 acres in Indiana and have 3 horses.
Okay.
That's one.
Mm-hmm.
The Ditch That Textbook blog has been seen in more than 200 countries.
Wow.
If that's true. And
okay.
then
if
right, exactly. And the third one, I am a runner and I've run in 3 half marathons.
Well, I have to admit, I know you're a runner because you sometimes tweet out the mid-run aha that you think of while you're out there for the run. I would not be surprised if you had 25 acres out there in Indiana, but I was surprised by the horse thing. But I don't think there are 200 countries, Matt.
Okay.
I think there's like 190 some countries. So I'm thinking that the countries is the lie.
Well, it depends on what you say is a country and isn't a country. Based on the analytics that I've got from something that was tracking the people who were checking out the site, it had it listed as more than 200 countries. But I think you're right in that in some places they don't say that there are 200 countries.
Matt Miller, is this fake news?
Maybe it is. I don't know. So if you want to count that as catching my lie because my numbers were off and I said there were more than 200 countries and there weren't, then you can chalk up a victory for yourself.
No, I think you deserve credit for that one because that's amazing. If the website's been visited by people in 200 different geographical locations, whether they're countries or not, that is amazing. Okay. That's something to hang your hat on right there. So I'll give you that one. So I think the half marathons is true. I think the lie is the 25 acres and the horses then.
Yeah. And actually, it's only half a lie because I do actually live on 25 acres, really like in the middle of nowhere. Like there are 2 neighbors within a 1-mile radius of my house.
Wow. Was that a goal for you guys when you bought or built the house, was to have a lot of acreage?
We wanted to have some because we do live out here pretty rural and wanted to be able to like drive 4-wheelers on it and go mushroom hunting and, stuff like that. But, out here, it's like you either get a teeny tiny little plot of land or you get 400 acres of land. And it's like nothing comes up in between. And so when this 25 acre plot came open, we were like, okay, this is a little more than what we had expected, but it ended up working. And so, yeah, that's kind of how that all worked out. And yeah, we don't have horses. Horses are a lot of work. Yeah.
I believe it.
Yeah.
That's what made me doubt that.
Yeah, exactly. We've talked about getting cows out here because cows are a little bit less work, but yeah, definitely no horses. We have 2 dogs. That's about all of the animals that live on our land right now. So.
And the cows would help you with the lawn mowing because I'm sure that's quite a task.
Yes.
Maybe you guys should look into cows and goats to help you with the grass.
Yeah, that's right. My wife is real excited about alpacas. She wants to get alpacas for some reason. I don't know. She's very excited about that. But
she must want to make some blankets or something, maybe.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. Yeah. So yeah, and the lawn mowing is legit. Like that's a real issue because it takes me like 3 hours to cut all of the grass that we've got around here. So yeah, if some cows could help me out with that would be pretty nice. I'm
now picturing all of the tweeting you do happening from on your lawnmower, like you stop every 10 minutes for a tweet.
There's some truth to that. I was see, funny story. Last summer, I got to do one of the keynote speeches at the Flipgrid Student Voice Conference, and I feel like I wrote most of that keynote on my lawnmower.
Yeah,
I was going along, I was thinking about it, and every like 10 minutes I would stop and I would jot down a new idea in Google Keep. And it took me forever to cut the grass that time, but I came away with a decent keynote because of it. So
right. Well, you need like a good mindless task to help you really access that part of your brain, I think.
Yeah, definitely. There's some truth to that.
All right, so let's dive into the educational duct tape right now. The first question, actually first for those 5 new listeners we've got in today, I should summarize what educational duct tape is. So educational duct tape is my goofy metaphor that educational technology is at its most useful, most beneficial when it's not the goal of a lesson or an activity, but it is a tool being used to address a learning standard or meet a goal or solve a problem that you might have in the classroom, ultimately to benefit student learning, much like duct tape is never one's goal, but oftentimes it is a very useful tool to fix things around the house. That's educational duct tape in a nutshell. So here is our first question. So our first problem, our first question to solve with educational technology. How can students create visuals showing what happened in an experiment? So I'm thinking, for example, you're doing a chemistry experiment in class and they're looking at what happens with their solution on the Bunsen burner or whatever. How can they then use technology to create a visual that shows what happened in that experiment to reflect back on later?
Yeah. And for this one, my gut reaction is to go with what feels like my answer to everything. And that is that I think Google Slides could do a really good job of helping students to do this. On the Google Teacher Tribe podcast, Casey Bell and I talk about how Google Slides is like the Swiss Army knife of the G Suite. And it's because, obviously you can use it for a lot of things other than doing an oral presentation.
Yeah, there's so much you could do there. So how would you use Google Slides with it?
Yeah. So I think there's a variety of ways that you could do that. For instance, one thing that sometimes people don't realize within Google Slides is if you go to insert image, you can take pictures with your webcam. And so I could see aiming that webcam at something that you're doing in, like a chemistry experiment or, any sort of lab, taking some pictures of it throughout the process and then sticking those pictures onto individual slides, I think would be really cool. And then, of course, from there, you can use shapes. So if you go to insert shapes, and then you've got this huge variety of different shapes that you can use to, point certain things out, circle things. I mean, just for labeling in and of itself. And then, of course, with those shapes, if you double click on them, they become a text box where you can type text. So, just for that idea in and of itself, that's great. But then it also lets students do some reflection about what went well, what didn't go well, what surprised them. So they could even take pictures of themselves there and then add little speech bubbles and thought bubbles next to it so that they can insert themselves into it. And then, of course, from there, there's a wide variety of things that you can do too. Like, for instance, if within that lab you were referring to a theory or an equation or something that was developed by a famous scientist, all you got to do there is go to insert an image, search the web, and go find a picture of that person, stick them in the picture next to you. And then you can even have a discussion back and forth between each other about the implications of that on the science experiment. So I think there's tons of things that you can do to mash up images and text and shapes to show visuals of what happened in an experiment.
Yeah, I've typically over the years recommended Google Drawings for this, because it has those same drawing tools and the shapes for annotating and things like that Google Slides does. But I really like where you're going with slides because you could then leverage the fact that you have multiple, unlimited number of slides. So it can really become almost like a lab report, right? Where you're saying like maybe what the solution looked like at first, and maybe on another slide you type in your prediction, and then on another slide you put in that picture like you're talking about and annotate it, and then another slide you're putting in your reaction like you mentioned. Maybe on another slide, you're putting in that reference to that scientist or whoever maybe discovered this principle. Maybe you're putting in a picture off the web of an example of this happening in real life. So it gives you that flexibility of having it be on multiple different slides. So you can really, really go deep into the process because of the freedom of having those multiple slides and having that, that blank white space to work with on each of them.
Yeah, exactly. And then, of course, whenever it's done, you've got the ability to share it with a link. You can even embed it into a website. Actually, another way that I really like to share your work so that it's not just turn it into the teacher is to do a gallery walk. And the simple way to do that is to have your students on their own devices just bring up their slide presentation and put it into present mode, and then set it on their desk and stand up. And then with all of them there, they can go walk around and look at each other's stuff and flip through each other's slides. And it does get kids up out of their seats. And so then they're able to, move around. It's a little more social, a little more, sort of interactive way to actually look at each other's stuff in person.
Yeah, a gallery walk is something that I don't think it's leveraged in a lot of classrooms. It was something that got used a lot in like a paper-based classroom, but it's almost like because we could share the documents between the students, we don't think of using that. But it really still is a great way to get them up and moving and seeing what each other did. You don't have to share the document to them. They could just wander through the room, wake up those brain cells by taking a walk around the room and actually seeing what each other did. And like you said, it's a social thing because then they can end up talking to the person that had whatever reaction they had as they're walking around.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of times with what we do with technology in the classroom, kids end up being real sedentary. They sit a lot and they don't talk to each other as much. And it's so easy in today's day and age to hide behind a phone screen and just text or Snapchat somebody. And this encourages some of those social skills and at least a little bit of getting up and moving around.
Right, exactly. And it's one of those things where you might use a couple extra minutes to do that gallery walk. It might take a few minutes longer than it would take to just everybody share their slides to one location and then look at each other's. But by using those extra few minutes, you're actually having like an educational win because the kids are probably developing a better understanding because they're getting up and moving and they're kind of waking up the brain cells. Brain science would say, don't have them sit still for an hour during class. So you're building in a little movement break there where they're actually doing something educational as they're doing it.
Yes, totally agree.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Another option, this one is not involving that physical movement, but is to have one Google Slides for the whole class. And then each kid doing the experiment has their own slide or two slides that they put their experiment on. So I'm thinking maybe if, you're doing a chemistry experiment and each kid is putting in a different amount of a different fluid or they're heating it to a different temperature or something, and they want to see what happens at each of these, then they could each do a different iteration of the experiment and be able to look through that whole slide deck and see what happened in everybody else's iterations. They could see, if we add 25 milliliters of this versus 50 milliliters of this is what happens. And it's all kind of in one place.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one that I mean, that's not something that's new either. I use that in my high school Spanish classes for years. I mean, like years ago, I was using that on a real regular basis.
Hmm.
There is one little piece of Google Slides that makes that option pretty cool, and that's the slide sorter option. If you look in the bottom left-hand corner, there's bottom left-hand corner of Google Slides on a Chromebook or a desktop or a laptop. There's a little button that looks like a 2x3 grid of rectangles. And if you click on that, you can see all of the slides kind of side by side in almost like a grid. And if you use the zoom feature in your browser, just by doing Control plus and minus or Command plus and minus on a Mac, you can zoom those to just the right size so that you can see everybody's slides all at once. And you get to kind of watch the students working together, on their own slides, of course, but you can see everything happening all at once. So,
Right.
yeah. Wow. This question has kind of taken a life of its own, hasn't it? It's gone like all of these different directions.
That's what happens, especially when we talk about the Swiss Army knife of G Suite there, right?
Right. Exactly. That's right.
Right. So I'm going to go ahead and give my answer a little bit different one. Like I said, I typically would say Google Drawings, and you've inspired me to maybe say Google Slides in the future when people ask me this. But I'm also thinking about what if the activity is not like, what if you want to show what's happening instead of just taking a picture? What if you want to show the motion, show the change in whatever experiment you're doing? And so you want video. So I think taking a video obviously is a great answer here, but then you would need to add something to show the understanding and the explanation of what's happening. So my idea is to take a video of the experiment happening and then have the students go back and either voice over the video, to explain this is what's happening at this point, and you could see it happening this way as the viewer watches, or add in some annotations to what's happening in the video. So maybe the video stops for it to explain the process, and then the video continues. So whatever video editing platform different people use in their schools, I normally go to WeVideo here because it does have a free version. It's pretty capable. It works well on Chromebooks. So that's a good way for them to do things like adding in those annotations and showing where something's happening in the experiment and adding in that voiceover to talk right over top of it. There are other options out there. One other little kind of hack here too is to use something like Edpuzzle, where it's really built for embedding in questions throughout a video, but you could use it in a situation like this to have the video pause at a certain point and maybe not add in a question, maybe just add in some text and say, at this point, this is what's happening in my chemical experiment, whatever it might be. But that way, the person is actually seeing the change happen, and the student is being kind of forced to go back through and actually explain, analyze what's happening and move up the blooms and the DOK levels and talk about what is actually happening in the experiment. That's what the science teacher is always trying to get them. Okay, we did the experiment. Now, do you understand what was happening in there? So either of these two things, whether it's a static image in a slide or a drawing or a moving video, they're going back and actually annotating what's happening there and explaining what's happening there and showing their understanding of the science that's at work.
Yeah. Yeah. That's cool. I think that's definitely one direction that you could take that. We could even sort of mash some of our different answers together in this one. And if we did a Google slide presentation where we took some pictures, we could always start rolling a screencast video using something like Screencastify and then flip through the slides and have the students voice over in that way. I've even recently seen a tutorial video. This was for someone in like the online business space. They were talking about how if you want to do webinars, sometimes it's just as easy to have screenshots of what you want to illustrate. Then it's almost just as easy to do that as it is to actually demonstrate it through video, because you can kind of flip through those slides and you can control it. And the videos tend to be a lot shorter because you don't have to navigate, you don't have to wait for page loads and stuff like that. So, having some photos or having some screenshots and flipping through those in a slide presentation and then voicing over them in a tool like Screencastify could work too. But yeah, I don't think you can go wrong with any of these things. I think this is pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, and that's educational duct tape right there, where it's like you've got to first start thinking about what is it that you're trying to achieve by using technology in line with this chemistry experiment or whatever physical activity it is. What is it that you're trying to get out of it and have the students do out of it? And then you can make the decision: is one drawing good enough, or do you need multiple slides? Do you need to have a gallery walk? Do you need to share the slides with everybody? Do you want to take a video, or do you want to do what you're saying and take pictures but then turn into a video? Like, what is it that you're trying to get the kids to take out of it? And you might do different things from Monday's experiment to Tuesday's experiment just because of the actual goal that you have in the classroom. Right. We shouldn't start with, this is the technology I want to use. We should start with, this is what I'm trying to get the students to learn. This is what I'm trying to, leverage to make happen here.
Yes, totally agree.
One other thing I should point out there, like as if this question hasn't taken enough of a life of its own, I mentioned using Edpuzzle and having it stop every however long for the students to make their point about what's happening in it. We could actually do that really well in Google Slides too, without having to use another platform. If you put your video that you take onto, say, Google Drive, you could then put it in the slide and have it start and stop at certain times. So you could have maybe slide 1 shows from second 0 to second 15, and then slide 2 actually has the student type in some information about what happened. And then in the third slide, maybe it goes from second 15 on to second 22. And then on the next slide, it shows what happened there. So they're actually kind of breaking down that video without having to use another tool outside of the ones they already use, like slides. They just take that video, upload it to Drive, and then what you do is you add it into the slides. And if you click on your video in a slide and click video options, there's an option there to set start and end times of the video. And you can just have the same video on different slides playing different segments of it.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's brilliant. Yeah, I like that.
A lot of different things we could do there. So let's go ahead, as if we haven't gone far enough and overwhelmed everybody with ed tech ideas. Let's do another question, right? So what's your question here, Matt?
Yeah, so my question is, how can students make their learning sticky? As in, you mentioned earlier that brain science, how can we, I guess it's almost like learning smarter instead of learning harder. So my question is, how can students make learning sticky and fun? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I first of all, I love that you reference this sticky learning so often, Matt, because I think back to my schooling, and I was a good student and I performed well on tests and my report cards always looked good. But if you ask me questions today about the things that I learned then, I'm very unlikely to remember any of them, right? Like if you ask me the state capitals, which is probably a test that I got 100% on when I was in 5th grade or whatever, I'd be able to name like 8 of them. Right. And it's because the learning wasn't sticky. And I think the teachers that I had then, they were doing their best and they were doing what they knew how to do. But nowadays, I think we know more. Right. So we've got to do better. And so some ways to make learning sticky, we know that people understand something better if they explain it to somebody else and if they teach it to somebody else. So I think anytime we could use video to have students teaching a concept or explaining a concept to somebody else, I think that that's going to be more sticky. And it can be fun if you do it right. And I think what helps make it sticky is if the students are really taking it seriously. And in order to get them to take making that video seriously, it's got to go to more of an audience than just their teacher. So I think if you're doing something that involves like Flipgrid, where then the students explain a concept or demonstrate a concept and put it out there for their classmates to see, then it's going to become inherently more sticky because number one, they've explained it. Number two, they're valuing their product more because they want to impress those people who are seeing it. And then you could even leverage it and reach out to other, they call them grid pals on Flipgrid, and share it out to students from another school. Right. I saw a project somebody was discussing on Grid Pals earlier where different people or different classrooms were explaining concepts to classrooms from other different schools. And then they were having conversations based on them. So then you take it up a notch by saying like, oh, I really like the way you explain this. What do you think of this? And then the student has to then up their knowledge a little bit more to have that discussion. And then we've got some super sticky learning there. I hope that would be super sticky.
Yeah, definitely does. This is really interesting that in our first question about the experiment that I leaned on slides and you leaned on video.
Right.
And now here we are talking about making learning sticky and fun. And now you're leaning on video. And I'm going to go a little bit different direction, but still sort of the same direction. So instead of slides, one option here, I think, is to use Google Drawings. And of course, Google Drawings isn't the it isn't the secret sauce that makes the learning sticky. But whenever you can pair images and text together, that's the stuff that brain science tells us is really powerful. There is this idea called the dual coding theory that says that whenever we encode ideas into our brains using images and text together, that's super strong. Super cool, right?
Right. Super cool. I'm super excited about this idea.
I am super excited too, right? Yeah. So I always think of it as it's kind of like the braided rope. You think of ropes and how if they have just individual strands, they're not very strong. But whenever you braid them all together, then all of a sudden they're really strong. And so I think of it as whenever you have images and you have text and they're together, they form that really strong bond. And there's a couple of things that I really love to do related to that. And the one in Google Drawings is to create infographics. And so for me, I love pulling together the shapes that you can pull into a Google Drawing along with the text. And then I love to pull in icons from a site kind of like the Noun Project, which you can go to thenounproject.com to find. There's another one called Flat Icon that you can use. And having students pull those icons in to represent the ideas that they talk about. So they put in a little bit of text, maybe a sentence or two, and then have an icon that matches with it. And then more text, more icon, more text, more icon. That's one way to go about it. One thing that I've found is that whenever you have students search a database of images, they can get lost down the rabbit hole pretty easily.
Yeah.
They start looking and looking and looking for that perfect image, or they're just amused at all the images and they're just looking and 10 minutes later, they still haven't found that one icon.
Right.
So one way that I've found to help that is to go ahead and download a whole bunch of icons that you think your students might want to use for this particular project. And then you stick them off to the side of the slide or the drawing. Because that, in Google Drawings and in Google Slides, you can see the boundaries of the slide or the drawing. But then you've got the gray space on the side, which is your workspace. So I love to be able to pull in a bunch of those icons and stick them in that workspace off to the side so that students can then pull them in as necessary. Right. Or even better, if they click on them and use their Control-D keyboard shortcut to duplicate.
Nice. Then
they duplicate, they move it over, and then they preserve their icon library over there. So, just little things like that I think can be really useful. And I could go on and on about other things that I can do to make that visual learning sticky and fun. But that's probably a good place to stop right there.
Yeah, I like that a lot because you're thinking when you make an infographic, your goal isn't to store some knowledge for yourself. Your goal is to communicate some knowledge to somebody else, right? So you've got to think about your audience and you've got to synthesize what you learned well enough to communicate it back out to somebody else. So you've got to think, what are the important things for me to put in this infographic? How do I organize the infographic so that the viewer is going to, gain some understanding from it? And what icons and things like that can I put in? And also, a little thing that makes it a little bonus for the students, for the learners, is that they are thinking about some visual design stuff like that for how their audience is best going to understand things. So whereas we used to have students have a tendency to put in all of those goofy images and emojis and videos and GIFs and things like that were totally unrelated, now they've got to think, I've got to get my audience to understand what I'm explaining. So I've got to be, kind of lean and clear and concise in the way that I graphically set this up so that they're able to understand what I'm saying here.
Yeah, it really is. And as far as the text goes, we talked a lot about the images, but as far as the text goes, just like you said, it's a lesson in brevity.
Right.
And if you think about in this world today, we have so many words and so much noise. And if you can communicate your idea concisely, that's definitely a skill and definitely an advantage.
Yeah. I've talked before on the show about how we don't know what skills, we don't know what topics that we're going over in the classroom that students are going to need out in their careers, but we do know these certain skills like this, and the ability to communicate effectively with an audience, and even I'll say to create visuals that communicate with an audience. Those are going to be life skills that our students are going to need in their careers, almost regardless of what career they're in.
Yep. Totally agree with that.
One other, I'm going to put a link to this into the show notes, but one other thing that I want to mention here is you've got a great post on the ditchthattextbook.com site about caption this image or caption this drawing, where you do kind of the same thing, where it's not really an infographic. Do you want to describe that really quickly?
Yeah, I'd love to. This is a post that I wrote together with a teacher in Missouri named Laura Steinbrink. And the idea behind it goes really well, actually, with our experiment that we talked about earlier. The idea is that you pull in an image into a Google Drawing. It could be a photo that students take through their webcams, or it could be a picture from current events or from history. It could be an illustration of a story that you're reading. And then within Caption This, there are a variety of levels, and the levels really sort of work up through the different levels of depth of knowledge. So for instance, level 1 could be just to label some things in the picture. So, I mean, that's kind of like your basic fact recall.
Right.
But then it could even progress further. The example that I always love to give, if you've ever been in one of my trainings, and I've presented on this, you've probably seen me pull in a picture of that famous painting of Washington crossing the Delaware. And I think, you could obviously label who is Washington, what is the river, what are 5 things that you remember about it. But you could also put a thought bubble next to Washington and ask the students, okay, what do you think Washington is thinking here?
Right.
And obviously that means that you have to put yourself in Washington's shoes. You have to see things from a different perspective. And you can even follow that up with a thought bubble next to one of the soldiers and say, what do you think that person's thinking? That kicks it up to level 2 on Webb's depth of knowledge.
Right.
And then if you go a step further and you have students explain their thinking, why did they think that Washington thought that or the soldier thought that? Now all of a sudden you're justifying your response, which basically kicks it up to level 3 in Webb's depth of knowledge. So it's a very low prep activity, which usually is what we're going for, but it also can yield a lot of really good critical thinking.
Yeah, and that's sticky, I think, too.
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
I mentioned earlier, like my schooling and the things I don't remember that I did well on a test, a couple decades ago. I don't remember why he crossed the Delaware. I don't remember where at in the the process of the American Revolution he was crossing the Delaware. Like I don't remember, like, was this early in the wars? Was this before the wars? Was this after the war? What is this? I don't remember all that stuff. But I think had I done an activity like this and thought through why he was doing it, what the soldiers were thinking, explaining the reasoning behind what I think was happening, what was going on through their minds, and if I'm captioning what they might be saying at this point, then I think that's inherently more sticky than just remembering that it happened.
Yes.
Or just reading about it happening.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that.
Yeah, well, what a great conversation. I'm guessing that caption this, is that one of the 101 practical ways to ditch that textbook?
I can't remember off the top of my head, but I wouldn't be surprised if it is. And if it isn't, then people can just go to ditchthattextbook.com/caption this, and you can see the whole post.
Nice. I think everybody's going to have to go and get that ebook, the 101 Practical Ways to Ditch That Textbook, and look and see, is it in there? Because Matt can't remember. So we've all got to go find and check. You could find that by going to ditchthattextbook.com/101. And I know I don't know why I'm sharing your Twitter on here, Matt, because I'm positive that everybody's already following you. But just in case, he is at JMattMiller, not JakeMillerTech. We get a lot of people. Do you notice that sometimes I get thanked for your stuff and you get thanked for my stuff? It's the Miller thing.
Yes, that's right. There's a J and a Miller, and it's kind of hard. P.S. That J does not actually mean Jake. My full name is not Jake Matt Miller. It's the J actually stands for Jeffrey, which is my dad's name. I'm named after him. It was very confusing.
And it's not Jimmy either.
No, it's not Jimmy Matt either. Yeah, that's right. So here's a little life lesson for the people that are listening. If you want to name your child something, please just name their first name Matt. Don't intentionally try to, call them by their middle name from day one, because it's not good.
Every teacher understands that, because we've all had that student where like the grade book says their name is Bill, but we have to call them Sam or whatever because that's I go by my middle name, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, don't do that to a kid.
I imagine that being difficult.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so every now and then I'll get one of those tweets like, "Hey, at JakeMillerTech, I really love your book, Ditch That Textbook. Thanks so much for writing it." And I'll be like, "Yeah, no problem. Just send the check to."
Yeah, exactly. That's right.
Right. I'm writing a new one. You could just mail your check right now. It's in Ohio, and I'll send you the new one as soon as it's done.
I will send it to you just as soon as it's done.
Right. All right. Well, Matt, thank you so much for being on. I know everybody's going to go follow you on Twitter. If they don't already, they're going to go grab that ebook, which I've linked into the show notes. They're going to visit ditchthattextbook.com. And if they're on Instagram, or Insta, as we say, they're going to go to Ditch That Textbook, or look for you on YouTube at youtube.com/ditchthattextbook, or on Facebook. You're everywhere somebody could be. You're there. That Matt Miller, you could find him, find your source to Ditch That Textbook ideas and stuff like that. And you could also reach out to him at matt@ditchthattextbook.com. Matt, what's your MySpace handle?
Oh gosh, I have one. I just don't remember what it is anymore.
I'm gonna go track you down on there. J Matt Miller on
that might be it. Actually, I wouldn't be surprised if that's it. Yeah.
Nice. Well, thanks so much for being with us today, Matt.
All right, it was my pleasure. Thanks.
OMG, you guys! I just interviewed Matt Miller. I can't believe that I called him out on saying that there were more than 200 countries. Jake! The guy has a blog so awesome that it's been viewed in more than 200 distinct regions, and I had to tell him that there were slightly less than 200 countries. I'm sorry, Matt, but there's 197 countries. I'm not even sure how many there are. Oh my gosh, I feel like I'm Sheldon Cooper or something. Come on, Sheldon! Well, I hope you guys enjoyed the interview. Matt shared such awesome ideas. He is just a rock star educator. Now that I've shared how awesome Matt is, it's time to share how awesome the duct tapers are. First up, this week's Apple podcast review comes from Melflypar, Melflypar. Whoever you are, thank you so much. The title of the review was Patch Away. I love this one for the Star Wars references throughout. It says, duct tape is like the Force. It has a light side and a dark side, and it holds the universe together. Not sure this podcast has a dark side. Really enjoyed listening so far. Looking forward to more episodes for my commute in the future. Thank you so much for that, Melfly, whoever you might be. I really appreciate that. And the Star Wars references were not lost on me there. Next up, some of my favorite tweets from the week. M. Murata, good friend of Craig Shields, it appears, says, enjoyed listening to at JakeMillerTech, #EDU Duct Tape podcast with at C Shield about Jamboard and even math tech tips. I love it when somebody references something like that from the show. And she also threw in some emojis there for the taco salads that we've discovered Craig has an affinity for. Next up, at M_joy of heart said, goal accomplished. Thanks at Chris Figgener for sharing your expertise and time with us, and at JakeMillerTech and at Ann Radefeld. Listening to #EDU Duct Tape podcast is a wealth. Thanks, #Skype a scientist for this wonderful opportunity. And then she shared a whole bunch of pictures. So what they're referencing here is that after hearing episode 2 of the podcast, when Ann Radefeld and I discussed different ways to connect learners to the global society of expertise and other learners out there, they went at their school and tried out Skype a scientist. And they connected with this marine conservation biologist who is a PhD candidate at Texas A&M University and is identified as a Time Next Generation leader. I mean, how awesome is it that students connect with these people? So thank you for sharing these pictures and the information about this experience. How cool for kids to get to experience this. And I love, love, love hearing about these things that are generated out of the podcast. Up next, at Mrs. Tech Pig, Abby says, I finally finished this week's episode of #EDU Duct Tape podcast with at C Shield. I loved learning more about the Jamboard, and I'm liking the idea of it being an alternative to Padlet. I got tickled when you freaked out over who was controlling the computer. So when we were talking about Jamboard, I was trying Jamboard out on my phone and then saw it appear on my computer and was wondering who was controlling the Jamboard. It was me. I thought about editing that out of the final version of the podcast, but I thought it was too fun. So Abby, I'm glad you enjoyed that there. Next up, at Dr. McLeod, Lance said, another great episode of #EDU Duct Tape addressing math. My 3rd grade son pipes up and says, we could drive to Ohio and listen to 12 episodes. Guess he wants to meet at JakeMillerTech. Lance, I'm not sure why your son wants to drive here and meet me, but he could hang out with my 3rd grade son. They could talk about math and probably play some Nintendo Switch, and you and I could geek out about educational technology. This was a fun tweet. I like that Lance listens to podcasts with his kids in the room. I've tried it before, and my kids are like, Dad, turn this off. Except for when it's me. They're very fascinated hearing my podcast. So I guess I could get them to listen to my podcast. Up next, at HGSys, Holly says, listening to hashtag EDU Duct Tape Podcast, and at JakeMillerTech just said, yeah, like Jimmy Fallon on The Tonight Show. I think my coffee went all over the windshield. I was laughing so hard. Holly, I'm really sorry about your coffee and your windshield. I hope you didn't snarf any of it out of your nose, because hot coffee coming through the nose, that would just burn. That would not be good. She says, thanks for the hashtag hump day humor. I never noticed that we're consistently bringing the hump day humor here on the podcast since I release on Wednesday. So I'm glad I could provide that to you, Holly. At Allie McCutch, who seems to make it into this segment every week and tweets to me every week the picture of the beautiful setting that she's going for her run in while I'm dealing with stupid Ohio winter. She listens to the podcast on her runs and keeps posting these pictures of these beautiful settings that she gets to run through, and I'm jealous. But she said she had to stop her run this week, and LOL when I imitated at Jimmy Fallon with it. Yeah. So glad you enjoyed that, Allie. But I'm so jealous of your running setting. Next up, some new tweeters with the hashtag EDU Duct Tape hashtag this week. At 54 Mr. _Meyer, at Anna, I'm guessing actually, M Perez 1, at Applin Teacher, at Busy ITC, at C Knight 97, at Jesus is Flipping, at JLee Tech Percent, at JVS, actually it's JV Senora SRA Barrett, at Melissa Labata Hakuna Matata, at Melissa Hakuna Matata Labata. I'm sorry. This is too far into the show and I get goofy at this point. At Mrs. Wyatt's Class. Those are our new tweeters. We are at 175 distinct different people who have tweeted with the hashtag EDU Duct Tape. And that doesn't include retweets. 175 different people. That's so awesome. That's so cool, you guys. Oh my gosh. I joke that there's 23 people listening and we have 175 people tweeting about the show. Let's see if we can break 200 before next week. Yeah. Let's finish it off here with something from the Educational Duct Tape Flipgrid community. If you thought I was geeking out and fangirling a little bit earlier when I got to have Matt Miller on the show, well, now I get to say that the Jen Giffen at Virtual GIF actually sent in a video to the Flipgrid for the show, and now I get to play on the show. Jen is a rock star. If you don't follow her at Virtual GIF, you need to do that. Let's check out what Jen has to say.
Hi, Jake Miller. Jen Giffen here at Virtual GIF on Twitter. I'm also the co-host of Shooks and GIF, the podcast, which you so graciously donated some of your time to co-host a couple weeks ago with Kim. Thanks for that. I just want to give a big shout out to your new podcast. I love educational duct tape. The metaphor is so spot on. I love the solution theme because it really allows for those who are new to educational technology or those who employ it on the daily to really find solutions for problems that they're seeing with their class. Keep up the great work. Keep inviting the great guests. Can't wait until your next episode airs every week. Love it. Thanks.
Thank you so much for that, Jen. She is just awesome. You should listen to her podcast, Shooks and GIF, with the awesome Kim Polishuk. We're actually going to be hearing both of them coming up on the podcast here in a couple weeks. I'm very eager for that. That finishes off episode 10 of the Educational Duct Tape Podcast. I can't believe we're through 10 episodes already. That's just bonkers. Next week, we'll be back with my good friend, Amy Roediger, who is she's a hoot. You're going to enjoy her. She's a high school science teacher and has a lot of expertise about how technology is best used in the classroom. While still appreciating good pedagogy. I think you're going to enjoy Amy's guest appearance, and I will see you all next week.
Thank you for listening to the Educational Duct Tape Podcast. Please visit eduducttape.com to join the discussion, share possible topics, inquire about being a guest, or contact Jake. And remember, duct is spelled with a T, not a quack quack K.